Mada and Linet, welcome to the How Humans Work podcast. I'm really glad to have you with me today.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited to have a conversation with both of you today because you work with African Solutions for African Problems, which is a NGO based in South Africa. And it's not just an NGO based in South Africa, but my mother-in-law was the founder of the organization. And I had a chance to meet you years ago, Linet, and Mada, to meet you this past fall at Priscilla's memorial. And I was so moved by what you were saying in your speech about the program. I saw the development, the growth of African Solutions through seeing her do this amazing work. And in the absence of her passing, I really got to see the silhouette of her effort. It was a really profound thing to see, without her being the intermediary, see what you're all doing. And in the season of social cohesion, I thought it would be really amazing to tell the story of African Solutions for African Problems. So that's why you're both here, and I'm really glad to have you here.
Awesome. We're so excited to be here.
So tell me a little bit about where you do your work as an NGO for the communities in South Africa.
Okay, Jeff, we're based in Eastern Cape of South Africa. Back in 2003, Priscilla got into an old car and drove all around the countryside and found that there were some extremely marginalized remote villages where their children were very badly affected by the HIV pandemic because of just the enormous amount of deaths and no help reaching. So the sort of villages where we're still working in an expanding circle almost from Matatiele in the Eastern Cape. It's very close to the Lesotho border. It's landlocked area. We're talking 5 to 7 hours drive from the nearest airport. Dirt roads, very mountainous, extreme weather, very, very cold in winter, very hot in summer. And we actually call these communities the last mile communities because they are marginalized by lack of service provision. It's anything that a government needs to roll out and service providers need to roll out. When you get to that last mile, it gets too expensive. The return on investment can be quite low for, let's say, cell phone towers. So there's very poor connectivity. And we've got villages where you might have 2 days of reasonable signal in a week. And many communities still don't have running water, for example. So it's sort of I think the last mile is a very good term for it. I don't know, Linet, if maybe you want to add something around also the communities that we work with.
I would say that we reach the communities where no one else wants to go because service provision is very poor because even the government departments do not want to go there because the roads are bad, like Mada has said, and connectivity and the distance. The distance. Sometimes it's not just that it's far from town, it's just how you get there. So I think we pride ourselves in reaching the ones that are forgotten.
So true. And in terms of the culture there, we are mainly Sotho and Xhosa people. So the two tribal backgrounds of the people there. Also being close on the border of Lesotho, it's almost where those two tribal cultures meet and overlap.
Yeah.
For people who aren't familiar with South Africa, I think if I remember when I was there, I think they have 17 national languages. Is that right?
12.
Okay.
Yeah, 12.
I inflated it, but a lot. Yeah, a lot. 12 is a lot, and it's a very tribally diverse place, yeah?
Absolutely.
And out there in that Eastern Cape zone where it's kind of forgotten, is there like any sense of the history, how it got so remote or how it got so overlooked in terms of the rest of the country's development?
I think the easy answer is terrain. And like we just explained, it's hard for services to reach. It's hard. We've been trying to bring satellite connectivity. We are so desperate to get low Earth orbit satellite connectivity to the villages, because that's our first hope of being able to have a WhatsApp video call with some of the people we work with rather than drive the 2 hours to get to them. You know, that would be such a leverage point for us in terms of scaling what we do and being able to reach more people. But we have to wait for for the services to become available, because the normal cell networks, the terrain is too difficult. It's too expensive to work there. And I think, as in many countries, resources are often pulled towards cities, towards big urban centers. The same reason big nonprofits work in areas where they can report very big numbers. So we don't work with very big numbers of people, but we work very deeply in each community. So we work with like a social group in each village, rather than working with a theme, for example, financial literacy or gender-based violence or food security. We actually work with a very holistic basket of services, because that's what a whole community, a whole village will need to lift themselves out of poverty.
So being out in that context, being really remote, being underserved, under-resourced in terms of services, service provisions, I think you call them there in South Africa, that those aren't there. So where does that leave people in those communities that need so much?
I can go forever when we're talking about the needs. But what we have identified as the emerging trends in the communities is gender-based violence. So people need awareness on that. They need education on that. There is food insecurity that needs to be addressed. There is early childhood development that is overlooked in our communities. There is, what else, Mada, is there?
Gosh, it's such a long list. I always think about all the statistics of, for example, South Africa has the highest incidence of gender-based violence in the world, and it's actually been declared a national emergency by our government. We've done some of our own research. We work in high schools with youth, where some of the 15-year-olds, 90% of them have said we are either experiencing this right now or we have been victims of gender-based violence. So we're talking almost like every problem that a third world country might have is just even worse in these very remote areas. So we have 74% unemployment in the Eastern Cape. We've got the worst child development statistics, so the stunting because of malnutrition and poor water delivery sometimes, or oftentimes. And then, of course, there's just this social fabric that's been torn by the amount of deaths that happened from HIV. Even though that the death toll has reduced dramatically, people are missing. There's a whole generation almost missing, or has big gaps in it. And so children are so much more vulnerable. They might be staying with a grandmother because one or both their parents have passed on. And any adults that are of working age in the communities will have migrated for economic reasons to the cities to try and find income. And so I think it's kind of an important thing to mention, just that the legacy of HIV, because it really has ravaged communities, and it's been hard for communities to move on from that. I think those are sort of big themes in terms of the problems and the context of the needs that we try and address. But one thing that has recently become very top of mind for us is also the amount of trauma that people are dealing with from all of these things. I mean, being chronically poor is traumatic. Never being able to think about how am I going to get out of poverty because you're so busy thinking about how am I going to feed my child. It's quite harrowing sometimes to realize that this is the daily reality of people sometimes. And there's you can't say, but what if they could, because there is no opportunity. So we go in with this holistic basket of services, I like to call it, although you'll hear just now how we don't go and offer a basket. We're all about finding people who are being proactive and supporting them to create opportunity. But it has to be very much holistic because it's a whole host of problems. It's not one or two things that are troubling.
Yeah, thank you for naming that.
And
I think it's
yeah,
yeah. Go ahead, Lynette.
okay. And to add on to that matter, we should also not forget the birth certificate and IDs. That
Yes.
is a very big need because of where we are situated in Matatiele. We're at the border of Lesotho, so we have this problem of undocumented children. So they struggle to get to school, they struggle to get social services. So, yeah, that's one of our biggest needs in our communities right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
That we're,
So that's like a
yeah,
massive hurdle if you can't like legitimately say I'm this person and at an ID or a government or birth certificate level. Even the limited resources that are there become more difficult.
Absolutely. You might have a household where there's a mother with five children. And because the father was the South African, the mother may have been from, let's say, Lesotho. The father's the South African. Those children are all South African citizens by right, by birth, through their father. They can't get birth certificates because dad may have passed from HIV. He might be away in the city. The birth may have been in this rural town, village with, no clinic or hospital in sight. Some of these villages, the best they have is a mobile clinic every 2 weeks. That is all of their medical access. And then there's no birth record. And
yeah,
Home Affairs is, of course, very wary of giving accidentally citizenship to somebody to whom it doesn't belong. And so for these children to get documentation is near on impossible and unaffordable, just the trips to go in and queue up, etc. And that means they can't get a social grant. And in that household with this mother and five children, that tiny little grant that is available for every child in South Africa would have at least meant the most simple sort of basic baseline of we can buy food this month.
mm,
And it also then goes further. It goes to being able to enroll in education, being able to get your matric certificate, that's your end of high school certificate, your
yeah,
qualification, that then gives you access to tertiary education and funding for tertiary education, not available to you if you don't have a birth certificate.
Yeah.
So it's a massive, massive impact. And when we look at trying to support people to get out of abject poverty, that is like a first step sometimes. Just that can knock the worst of the hunger. Just being able to
mm,
access basic grants.
Which requires an ID and a birth certificate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How laborious is that? How much work is it to establish that 7 years later or 10 years later after a birth?
Annette, you have so many stories about this.
okay. Yeah. Um, because in South Africa, only the mother can register the child. So the dad cannot go to the home office and register. And if the mother is from Lesotho or any other country, they cannot register their children if they do not have proper documentation to be in South Africa. So the only possible way to get those children registered is to get a DNA test from the dad. Once they have a DNA test from the dad and it's positive, then they can then start the process of, registering their children. And it's a very long process. We have people that were tested last year and they still have not been called in for an interview just to go through the next process.
I just wanted to add that journey of having to wake up at 4 a.m. to get on a transport. There's one transport out of the village and one back in every day. So they'll have to get up really early, get to town, try and be in the queue at Home Affairs, wait there. Sometimes they'll wait all day. 2 p.m. they might be told the systems are offline or come back next week because we can't see to you today. And that is a rinse and repeat exercise until one day they get lucky and they might get to the front of the queue, and then the official will say, well, you're missing this document. But 2 months ago when we were here, that wasn't a requirement. Well, it is now. And this is sort of an ongoing cycle. So how we actually work with this is to stay very much in touch with what Home Affairs requirements, how they might change, and we keep everybody in the village sort of informed so that when they do go, that time isn't wasted. Yeah,
That makes
but
sense.
it's onerous. It's horrific what people go
It
through.
sounds difficult, and being in the limbo and hanging in the balance like that, waiting and waiting and waiting to establish oneself. I can imagine that's difficult when you're trying to find a way out of poverty and you don't have the tools even to begin that process. So let's talk a little bit more, because I can see the frustration, maybe the humiliation in that process of not being able to feel valid, you know, but this and understand this idea or this reality that it's really traumatic to grow up in this difficult situation. And honestly, as I was preparing for this conversation this morning, I was feeling quite heavy about it, just thinking about these are real people's lives, and felt a little ashamed of being talking about them, but also think it's important to talk about people's lives that I don't know, you know, and highlight these needs and talk about the challenges of building and supporting communities and people that I don't know in a very difficult circumstance. So maybe we could start talking about how. So there's the first need. Okay, documentation. You help them save some time by letting them know what they need. What else is ASAP doing these days to support these Eastern Cape communities?
Maybe I can just take it back ever so slightly to how we approach our work,
Okay.
because we recognize it's a massive problem. There are hundreds of communities we wish we could be reaching. And we also, and I know this was from the start, Scylla's approach was always that the real power lies in finding people in communities who are already busy trying to do something, like the power of women coming together. Priscilla was very focused on women, groups of women, because I think she went to the slums in India, and I know at some point she was on hunger
Kenya.
strike.
Kenya,
Yeah, I was
yeah.
in Kenya.
Kenya. I thought she'd also gone to
Yeah.
India. Okay, maybe it was just Kenya, but I
Maybe.
know with Wangari Maathai, she spent time in Kenya, yes, and
Yep.
she saw just how incredibly people could come together and solve problems. And so ASAP was founded very much with that approach, and we've always stayed very true to that. We can't deliver aid because it's like giving a man a fish, you know, that idiom. And we go into these communities and we engage at the Imbizos, which are the tribal meetings with the chief, with the community members, and we have a long conversation. It might take several Imbizos where we follow an assets-based community development approach. It's very specific. It's about finding the existing assets in a village and then finding out how we can leverage them. And it's my belief that those assets most importantly are the people. Like, who are these people who are saying, yes, we have problems. Yes, everybody thinks we should wait for government, or yes, everybody thinks we just need money and everything will be solved. But here's what we could be doing, or I know somebody who's doing something and maybe we can do more of that, you know, and we find where are these ideas already happening and where's action taking place, and then we try and leverage those people. And it ends up always being a group, predominantly women, not always only women, of proactive people who then we just support, and they create a new vision for their communities, and then they start working towards that. And in terms of the IDs and documentation, we would then usually have identified somebody who's proactive, who's like, I want to do something about this problem. And we will train them up. And all we are often providing in this situation is airtime, so that they can make cell phone calls when they can find signal, information on what is Home Affairs requiring, and transport money, because for some people that's prohibitive. They can't afford to go to Home Affairs to stand in the queue. And more recently, we're also now supporting DNA testing. And then what we have found is that's a very effective way. Somebody in the community is doing all the actual work of going from house to house, getting the information together, of supporting the women. And then we have a paralegal on staff and we have a social worker on staff where things get complicated, where people get stuck, where there's a hospital record that they're told you must now travel to Johannesburg to go and get your birth record. We'll get on the phone. We'll support where a case might get stuck, and we'll liaise with Home Affairs as much as is like possible. But I think that sort of outlines how we work quite nicely as well.
Yeah.
We can reach so many more people. We're working 281 active cases right now. And if it was just our team trying to do this for people in the community, we might have been busy with 20 or 30.
The traditional village meeting is called an imbizo, right? So maybe paint a picture of that, because I think it just is a kind of just to build the feeling of that. What is an imbizo like? And perhaps Linet knows. Yeah.
I'm going to let you take this one, and maybe you could also just explain the difference between a Xhosa and a Sotho imbizo.
Okay, an imbizo is a community meeting that is held by the tribal authority, that is the chief, and his cabinet, if I may call them that. So every month there is an imbizo in a village where they discuss village issues, and they come up with solutions or whatever the outcome might be. So when we go into a village, we request to meet with the chief and his tribal at the imbizo, so that the whole community could be aware of who ASAP is, what they do, and what our intention is in their village. But in some cultures, especially in the Xhosa culture, as a woman, as a program director of the ASAP Foundation, I should be the spokesperson at those imbizos. But as a woman, I cannot address the chiefs. So a male colleague has to speak for me, because they will not recognize me as a woman. I cannot address them. So those are some of the haggles that we come across, but we always manage to push through them, because we know the cultures now, and we always make sure when you are going to an imbizo, take a male colleague with you. He's going to represent you. And sometimes you can't even speak, so you have to whisper to him what you want to say, and he will deliver it to the imbizo.
I don't know if it's polite to ask, but I'm wondering how that feels.
It shook me the first time, but I was warned by my male colleague that expect such, because this is the culture, this is how it's been done. And sometimes you want to show a sign of respect by standing up, and you can't stand up as a woman. You have to sit down. So I quickly got used to the custom. So I respect it. That's their way of life. And we want to work there. We want to reach out to their communities. So we have to do as much as we can to respect their culture and their customs.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that. It's also nice to get a picture of a little bit of what that's like. And part of me, at a cultural level, I'm curious around how the imbizos have stayed intact through such a taxing time as HIV and the kind of structure, because as you said, Mada, most of it's the women and the gogos, the grandmothers who've held the backbone when there's been this great loss of the core of young people and middle-aged people through the HIV/AIDS epidemic more intensely decades ago, but even still, you're still feeling the repercussion of that. So, I do have that curiosity, but I don't think that's, my cultural curiosity is not the focus of why we're here today. So I want to turn back to this sense of, the model and coming in and respecting the culture, even though they may be uncomfortable for me or you. in terms of the customs, but coming in and asking through the Mbizo, okay, hey, we'd like to come support. We're here to support who's doing things. So this model of adding fuel to the fires that are already there, so things can grow, or watering the seeds that are things that are already growing themselves, and just saying, hey, we have water and we have compost and we have soil, so to speak. So say a little bit more about why this model is so important.
Sure. So the assets-based community development approach that we use, I think we landed there through hard work, or hard, how would I say, it came at the end of a learning curve for us as an organization. And I know Scylla started this organization in October. It will be 23 years ago. And she drove so much of the work with absolute passion. Like, very few people can be pioneers like that. It takes a hell of a driven person, especially you've just heard a little bit about the cultural context, and to break through the roadblocks to actually being able to drive some change in those areas. Yeah, it takes an incredible force of nature, like Priscilla. But she's always known that it has to be about empowering people there, because if you come in and deliver a solution, when you leave, that's when the solution ends. And this is the story of the old way of doing aid in Africa. And I think Priscilla was really fantastic and a visionary in seeing that we will need to invest in the people that are there so that they can carry the work forward. And it's also the only way really to work at some type of scale, because of the deeply rural nature of the cultures, and because of the distance and the marginalized area and everything, the work has to be very, what we call, high touch. You can't go in, give a speech, everyone's now educated on a topic, and off you go, and you've done a great nonprofit kind of community development job. It's going back in and walking alongside people and going through processes over and over again, and sort of slowly helping people build. There's very little for success to hang on. So you can't just do a quick fix here and a quick fix there. It's deep work, and it's many years in a community. But when you truly empower people, that's when you see things taking off. And that is the one thing that I believe ASAP does incredibly well, is we are so good at finding the right people to work with in the communities, and then just to help them take off. So our approach is quite tapered. Like, we work very intensely for the first couple of years, and then it tapers off so that the people working in the communities can be more and more independent. And then even as you and I, working in a very different sort of first world setting, where I work remotely, so I don't work in the villages. I live in a more urban area. We still have people that we rely on to coach us and to mentor us, and in that same way, ASAP stays in and around the communities for many, many years, so that when things go wrong, we're there. We're at the other end of the phone, or we can pop in and we can come and work through you when you get to big roadblocks, so that things don't fall apart. Because I think it's very hard to imagine just how fragile any success is once you reach it. It might just be a really key driven person passing away, or it might be a climate event, or it might be COVID-19, or whatever next. It's a brittle environment, so it's very, very fragile to shocks. Yeah. I hope that's answered some of your question.
No, it is. I just didn't know if Linet wanted to add anything in at this point.
No, I think Mada said it very well. I don't think I want to dilute that.
Okay. Well, maybe we can get a little bit more into the core areas that you're supporting and finding people to support in these communities, particularly maybe starting with the children and the development of children.
Sure. So I'm going to ask just to backtrack again ever so slightly. Just quickly.
That's great.
I love adding context, as you've noticed. But we've recently looked, we've just been, we refresh our strategy every 3 years, and we've been looking at what do we know that's really worked, especially in high poverty contexts. And of 20 years of data, we've learned that people need 3 things to lift themselves out of poverty. They need to have healing, from trauma. They need skills, and they need access to opportunity. And of those three things, the healing is actually the most important. So when people are absolutely stuck, you can throw every intervention that you want at them. When communities are traumatized, they will not be able to move forward until they've accessed healing. So we have now taken those three as pillars, those three areas as pillars of all of our programs. So there is a healing component to whether we work with children or the adults that are going to support their development, or the adults in the village who are going to be working on gender-based violence and creating safe spaces, or the people who work in the community farms and in household gardens to reduce nutrition insecurity and to also create livelihoods for themselves. So healing is a big component. And then we look at skills. How can we professionalize things at the village level? So the children can't travel to a proper early childhood development center. You know, the 2 to 5 year olds, it's impossible. So how can we professionalize that service delivery at village level? So this year we're starting 8 new early childhood development centers, basically kindergartens, but it's eventually they will be funded by the Department of Basic Education. So we're training local women to be the service providers. And within a year or two, the government will actually be paying their fees so that the children can get the same level of education that kids, you know, in more urbanized centers can get. And then we are working with social auxiliary workers, as in, again, local women in the villages. We're training them as lay social workers, essentially, to look at training parents for 1,000 days. Child nutrition, how to engage with a baby, with an infant, how to, you know, essentially prevent attachment trauma. Sadly, a lot of those mothers will be teenage girls. So there's a lot around motherhood, I think, that might not have been passed on because the families are, you know, are fractured. So we'll bring in the 1,000 days training through local women, professionalizing at that level, which creates not only an opportunity for them, but it's delivering what those children need to develop optimally. And then the other sort of skills and opportunities that we're working on is around gender-based violence. So we are also training women to be local first responders in the villages. Should something happen, which, sad to say, really does happen too often, that there is somebody to go to. There's somebody who knows how to do physical and psychosocial first aid. There's somebody who knows who to refer you to, do warm referrals, as in go with you into town, get that transport with you, take you to the police if needs be, take you to the Tutuzela Center, call on ASAP's paralegal or our counselor to come and help with specific cases. But everything can already happen at village level. And then the other set of, well, the sort of skills that I think is quite exciting that we've started working on in the last couple of years is working with the tribal leadership. So tribal leadership is a very strong system in the deeply rural areas, deeply traditional, as Linet's just been explaining. And we have been working with tribal leadership, with the chiefs and the councils, to enroll them as the drivers of change when it comes to gender-based violence, to reform their own bylaws and to bring the Tribal Act in line with Human Rights Act, as far as working with initiation ceremonies, which is quite a groundbreaking thing, I think, to be able to say that we're now doing. And there's a really lovely story we can tell you if there's time.
There's time. There's time for that.
But yeah, so even upskilling tribal leadership, essentially.
Yeah.
When I say holistically, we really are working with a lot of things. And the last theme of food security that we work with is where we are working on agricultural skills, entrepreneurial skills, with local women and youth who have green fingers, and we make sure we find the green fingered ones. And they are planting these massive farms now, hectares, bursting at the seams. I always say, you know that people are really into it when you go behind the toilets buildings, and even there strips of beddings have been made. You know, like every little inch is planted up. So yeah, we have in each of those three programs, I would say we cover healing, skills, and opportunity.
Can we dive into a little bit of the actual aspects of the healing, like what that looks like, and what are some of the core practices maybe that help with the healing?
Okay, I think that's a really good question, and it's very interesting because for me as somebody I studied psychology. I recently finished a master's, and one thing I came to realize is that most of what we know about psychology is the weird cohort, right? Western, educated, industrialized,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. And it's very much based on individualist cultures. And where ASAP works is collectivist cultures. The Xhosa and Sotho people are very much tribal cultures. And so a lot of what we do is based on learning, but also learning from the people that we work with. So we can't go in with saying we run this program, we run that approach so much. It's a lot of it is coming out of the community, but what it will look like is typically a workshop. So if you're going to be working with us on a community farm, we are looking at a workshop around the healing of not only trauma, but also setting up the group that will be working together as a cohesive group, as a circle of human support. So there's a lot of trust building exercise. There's a lot of normalizing vulnerability. There's a lot of talking about people's life journeys, either the river of life or the tree of life. Linet, you might be able to give a little bit more detail about the contents there. But ultimately, looking to set up a supportive group of humans who don't have any problem with reaching out to one another when things get tough. And I think that's almost the thing. If there's anything that I would say that is the secret sauce of why these food security programs and the gardens are looking so amazing, it's that these people really support each other.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about those circles of support, Lynette, out there in the field.
We bring them all together, like maybe one group at a time, and we hold a workshop for them. And then individual stories and traumas come up. And our motto is always like, you cannot take care of somebody if you are not okay yourself. So you first need to heal so that if you are going to be a first aid responder, you need to first know yourself emotionally so that you can take care of somebody else. So if they have issues, we do individual counseling. And if we feel that they are building trust amongst themselves, amongst each other as a group, we then do a support group where they get to talk about their issues, where they get to talk about their healing journeys, and that helps tremendously on how they then get to, interact and assist the people that come to them with problems or with reports of abuse. I think that's what has really helped us a lot, because we also do support groups in schools. We request like 30 minutes in a school during break time and have a support group with maybe 10 kids. And we've seen how it's been working, because more kids would like to join, because we usually work with only those that are tied to a drop-in center that we work with. But then some kids that are not even from, that vicinity of the drop-in center would see the progress of the other children, and they would like to join. And I would like to say, yes, we lure them in with food, because we bring them hot dogs and, takeaways, so that they're enticed to come to the support group. Because if you don't, they would not show up. It's just going to be 5 kids or so. Now they know there's hot dogs. But then when they get there, it's more than that hot dog.
Yeah.
It's the child's soul. It's how much they express their brokenness and how much they want healing. So then after that, after they've expressed that during um, the group session, our counselor then goes in for individual counseling. They take that child through a journey and until they feel that the child is in a safe space. So, yeah.
Very moving. It's good to hear that. I can
Yeah.
get a feel for that. So I like how you backed up there, Mada, and brought us into the kind of context of you know what's working for the programs now, and that the healing and the skills and the access. And I want to go where you want to go next, and I do feel something in me obligated to talk about gender-based violence and really get into the truth of that and how to support ASAP, to support so people know how they can not just support the meals and the healing, but also really address what seems to be a really significant impact of the cycle of trauma. And I also want to make a comment here, which is what I feel listening to what you both just said is that in the spirit of social cohesion, that building the networks of social care is a form of protection. It's always the alone child or the alone woman who is more vulnerable to the harm of trauma cycles than if they're well placed in a context of, oh, there's people looking after, I feel loved, I'm not going to accept this, I'm loved, I have resources. And there's an inherent health in that, that I hear, that's kind of maybe the foundation actually is making that healthy community where people aren't isolated and vulnerable in the same way.
Absolutely. I think community resilience is our absolute, highest goal. And with gender-based violence, I mean, Linet has mentioned just casually what an imbizo is like for a woman wanting to say something. And she's, I think, touched there on the very deeply entrenched patriarchal norms. And when we started working specifically with gender-based violence, it came from the community, from people bringing to us cases of children. And I'm not even going to go there with, the things that we've dealt with and that we've taken to court, and, how it changes a village when you finally get the first child rapist sentenced in a village. It changes when people realize this is not a thing we don't talk about. This is a thing that nobody should be doing. We made what was kind of, maybe some people knew, but it was a little invisible. We brought it into the light, and we supported the women in those villages to bring it into the light. And then more and more awareness has been coming out of the villages and nationally even. And so as we engage with groups of people in the villages, it's become like a sort of a big pressing thing. And we've started working with the women in the villages, but addressing it at every level. I've mentioned training tribal leadership and enrolling them to be driving this change. Changing bylaws. There used to be bylaws such as, if there is an incident, such as a rape, it must be reported to the chief before it can be called into the police. And those bylaws have been changed, where it's like, no, this is a bad thing, the police get called. Like, there's no gatekeeping, for example, of when people can access justice. So we've seen really fantastic structural changes. And I think one really great example and a great new direction that we are seeing things going in now comes out of one village called Bubesi. And Priscilla was still working with Bubesi village with a CBO. CB is a community-based organization. It's a bunch of just very, very fiery ladies who I absolutely adore. And they call themselves Sinikitemba. And one of the youth beneficiaries that we worked with in this village is called Sinetemba. And he's now our paralegal. So when he was a teenager and Zilla was first working with the women in his village, he benefited from coming to youth group, career counseling with ASAP staff members. They helped him find sort of his direction. He ended up doing a diploma in law, which he finished last year while he was already working for us as a paralegal. And so that to me is such a great success story, but it gets better because he went back to his village and he engaged with the whole village in a community awareness. So we do this in all the villages where we work. We bring the whole community together. There's a tent, there's music, there's maybe a drive for HIV testing. There's, sort of a whole bunch of things going on around like things that are important for the whole community to understand. And when you're talking about social cohesion, this is where it really comes to life. The community are there, they attend, they're listening, they're dancing, there's food, and there's engagement. And then Sinetemba was leading a conversation circle where things were talked about that were never talked about before, such as why are men violent towards women in this village, in our village here? And men and women are all talking about this, which is also a very difficult thing to bring about. It's not like a first world culture where like, let's chat about this thing. It's like, is the woman even allowed to speak kind of thing. And do you know, some of the grandmothers spoke up and they said, I don't know why you're talking to us here at this community meeting. You need to go to the initiation ceremonies because it's when the boys go up to the mountain. They call it going to the mountain. And that's the rite of passage for boys to become men. And when they go up to the mountain and they come back down, they believe they're men, but they don't know what it means. That's when they start beating girlfriends, or there's crime, there's dropping out of school. There's like a host of problems that come when we see the boys come down from the mountain. And because this came up in the community meeting, and there was then this sort of engagement on this topic, Sinetemba went back to the tribal leadership and he said, let's talk about this. This came up, this came from the people. Here's the Human Rights Act, here's the Tribal Act. Let's look at how we can align these. And of course, it's a deeply difficult thing to discuss, the initiation ceremony. It is veiled in secrecy. No woman could even be at that meeting, trust me. But it was a few meetings. And when Sinetemba walked out of there eventually, 10 tribal leaders had signed up to take gender-based violence as a topic to these meetings, to the mountain. The boys are up there for a month. They had 8 different sessions during that month where they discussed what does it mean to be a man, what is positive masculinity. And not only the boys that went up there and the tribal leaders engaging with them, but the men from the village also go up and down over that month. So it became a community discussion in the place where the men come together and talk about what is it to be a man. And at the end of that month, this was December just past, when the young men came down, there were no school dropouts, there were no reports of violence, there were none of the problems that they had before. I mean, that just gives me goosebumps every time, because that's a community coming together, figuring out where's the root of this problem, and then what can we do about it. So I think that's the most beautiful thing we've seen recently.
That's really beautiful. I mean, that's amazing. And plus, to know that Priscilla knew him and he was supported by the work of ASAP and the full cycle of that. And I love that the gogos are like, hey, don't talk to us, or they have the information that needs to go that direction. And just that dialogue, that deep dialogue, and the way conversations can build us towards the right direction, build the healing towards the right direction. So where would you take us next in terms of the ASAP work, Linet? Stories of people changing, or other elements that you're supporting right now that are really fundamental to how you understand the project?
I think what is most fundamental right now is how ASAP responds to emerging trends. We are not stuck on one thing that, okay, we do gender-based violence, but where there is a need and it aligns with what ASAP does, we respond. Like we just recently collaborated with 2 foundations, and we is it delivered or gave Mada water to 2 communities.
Linet took these 2 foundations to go and meet these villages, and they invested in 2 big borehole projects. So I don't know how to answer your question. What's the right terminology? But we help them extract water, and they now have running water for the first time ever.
Yeah. It's like 11 taps in one village and 8 in the other. So those two villages, the whole village has water, running tap water, solar powered. So it's it's the listening to the communities and looking at what the needs are and what their strengths are and building on that. So now that those two villages have water, we are working on household gardens for each household. They must have household gardens. There must be vegetables there to feed the families, food security, because we are trying to fight food insecurity in our communities.
Yeah, no, I love that. Again, it's like I find myself keep like looking at these questions from a certain angle, and you both keep reminding me. It's like we are listening, we are responding, and we are seeing what's there, and we're helping those people who are helping. And it's just thank you. I appreciate that. And but the food security is or the even called it food serenity is a real serious aspect of supporting these communities to move out of trauma cycles, to move out of poverty, to move out of stress and into more cohesion. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, hungry children can't learn. We hear that all the time. Um, and the one thing that people do have out there is land. And in some cases, they have water. Not always, sadly. So we're still looking at bringing water to quite a few villages. And where we don't do the big water infrastructure ourselves, we'll bring partners in and introduce them, and then hopefully they'll be able to make that investment. And then the time that is saved and the health that people gain back from something like having potable water, running water. 3 hours a day, we did a baseline survey. 3 hours a day on average people were spending. And then there were several days a month that people were ill from the water source they had before. And then we see how can people leverage this. And then that is such a great springboard for sorting out food security when people can grow vegetables year round. That sorts out immediate hunger. And then where some of those gardeners will form into a farming group, and then they will get agri-entrepreneurship training. They'll get financial literacy training, and they will start developing markets for their produce. They'll be selling to neighbors, and we have farmers selling to local schools. And one of the most beautiful things that we see in this program, and it is sort of built this way, is that when there is excess, they donate it. And it's something to see the dignity of people who were hungry before and who were asking for food before, who are not only growing their own food, but they are sharing with people who are now more needy than them. It's really lovely to see. And there are grandmothers and there are young people. We even have a couple of grandmothers who joined the project at a garden called Sia Pambili. And they don't have their own plot where they're growing. They are encouraging the youth. They say, they're like, this is important. And they mustn't fail. So we will be here every day. And those two gogos, they sit in their chairs and they cheer them on. It's really fun to see. I imagine Scylla would have loved that because
Oh.
as a grandmother herself, she was
Yeah. She learned so
there.
much from the Go-Go's. I mean, she took her go-going so seriously, and it was a really
Yeah.
beautiful thing to see. She met all these amazing, dedicated grandmothers, and she really took it home.
Yeah.
What kind? Just the details are always interesting to me. What are communities growing? What kind of vegetables and things do people grow out in Eastern Cape?
They are diverse and it depends on the season because in winter they be cabbage, spinach, uh beetroot sometimes, but it doesn't do that well in winter. But in summer, it's just like you get your green peppers, you get your brinjal, which is eggplant,
Uh-huh.
you get carrots, kale, spinach, cabbage and spinach are all year round. Yeah. And you get potatoes in summer and in winter. We're still eating potatoes from the last season. Um, we have in summer we also have the staple crops, which are your pumpkins, butternuts, beans, and maize, which is corn.
And
Yeah.
turnips. Mysteriously,
And
turnips
turnip
are
is
hugely popular.
they love turnip.
Are you
Yeah,
not a
they
fan of
love turnip.
turnips, Mada?
Not a fan. Are you?
Well, if you come out to California, Alice makes a really great dish, and she does put a few turnips in with the sweet potatoes, like fried up, baked with some oil, and it's really good. So yeah,
That sounds
Mm.
a
amazing.
little bit. I like turnips in the right amount, but a lot, like not a lot of them, just a little bit here and there. How
Yeah.
about you, Lynette?
Yeah.
You like turnips?
I like them mixed with spinach because they can be a little bit like too bitter, but mixed with spinach, they're the best. But my colleague, who's the head of food security, that's his favorite vegetable.
Sure.
Fair
Yeah.
play.
So
Yeah. Go ahead.
no, I'm like, you cannot discourage the farmers to to grow them because the nutritious part is the bulb at the bottom of the soil, and the leaves do not really add value, but that's what they love. And if that's okay, then let them have it because they mix it with the bulb, you know. So then it has that nutrition value. But the one thing that we've been trying to encourage them to grow, which is not really taking up, I don't know if it's the soil or what it is sweet potatoes.
Mm.
They are not really doing well in this climate. Only one garden had really a good product out of the sprouts that we gave them. So we still need to look into that because that's a very good source of nutrition. Sweet
Mm-hmm.
potatoes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know part of me is thinking I'm kind of off track here asking these questions, but I also really appreciate just the imagination of the relationship with the plants and the specific plants and the food and what farmers like and the humor of turnips. And it just reminds me of how much nature is a resource for us in hard times, and it sounds beautiful to me. Garden energy, I'm not an active gardener, but plants and gardening I know are so important to the human soul, and that it's such a beautiful layer to the social healing for the water to be there and the plants to be there. And I think I saw, Lynette, you on a video where when they actually put the water in and they were singing, just the songs coming out and the joy of having, simple but meaningful and very connective relationships, like growing your own food and the empowerment of that and the earth and the green fingers. I think it's important, and it feels good to me after talking about the gender-based violence and the difficulties to have that in there too, if you get my drift.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I have one other thing on my mind I know for sure I want to talk about, but what else do you want to share with us about the story of ASAP at this point?
I think maybe one exciting thing that I can share is that we are trying to break through this connectivity divide where the people that we work with, the communities we work with, are almost segregated by a digital divide where they cannot access regular connectivity. And we have cell phone towers, and when they break, they don't get fixed because the return on investment's too low for the network providers, and so on and so on. And there's all these problems, but we are working on getting low Earth orbit satellites into every village. And we are working on a basket of digital tools that will become a smartphone-ready support system to the proactive people that we work with in the communities, to those groups, so that they can not only be connected to the world outside in a more meaningful way and to support when they need it from ASAP, but they can have tools that guide them and help them record and measure and provide For example, we have an early childhood development center. There are already existing apps where the principal will have one app that helps them do the bookkeeping and all their, documentation that they need to get compliant in order to gain that long-term government funding and be able to continue doing their work with the children. But the teacher also has an app that helps them do the roll call and the activities, and so those children can really access the same standard of education that all the other children in the country might be getting, or hopefully getting. And so that's exciting because it changes our work from being able to work. We used to work in about 4 or 5 villages a few years ago. Now we're in 11. And then it starts making exponential growth possible. And it starts making the way for this work to spread much faster, become a really serious possibility, not too far from now. So that's something I'm very, very very excited about personally.
Linet, do you want to share anything on what else you want to add in?
I think for me, it would be over the years, I've seen the growth of ASAP. I've seen how we always respond to what the communities say. And to have Mada now on the team with her, I don't know what to call it, but she has this thing of like sensing what, how we should respond. And it's always exciting to see that, you know what, this is for the best for our communities. And the one thing that's really, really excites me and that is always at the top of my heart is the birth certificate and ID drives, because we want to see people documented. We want to see children, get and access their social grants and their rights and get their matric certificate. So for me, I think that one, and the food security, gardening, because I have green fingers, those are the top for me. Like it's really connecting with people and it's addressing real social issues within our communities.
Thank you. And Jef, if I may, there's one last observation I'd like to share. With ASAP, we're very much working with communities, whole communities, so social groups, and I know your theme is social cohesion, and ultimately in creating resilience and trying to support and build resilience, that is through a process of creating social cohesion, right? And one extraordinary thing that I have witnessed in my time with ASAP is that I've gone over to the UK and then I went back now for Scylla's memorial, where you and I met in person for last year. And what really struck me was the community that Scylla built. I know she was a firebrand, like she was a go-getter, and I know she drove with the sheer power of her will. She created an organization that could last for at least now 23 years, which is something in itself. But the reason that worked is because she created a community of supporters. Her family were enrolled. I think whether you liked it or not, you were going to be involved and support ASAP. Her friends were involved and their families and their friends. And when we were at her memorial in October last year, there were people who had been involved from day one. And everybody found a way to contribute something, whether it was time or volunteering or money or pulling in somebody they knew who had money. But there was a community of people who've walked with this organization through all these years. So I don't feel that ASAP is the South African organization. I feel it's just the spearhead of this community that's been driving it. And it's just the most beautiful thing that this community has been supporting these communities on the very other side of the spectrum, in the hardest to reach, least connected, most marginalized, most multidimensionally poor people that nobody most people in the world don't even know exist or would give a second thought. And they have changed absolutely everything for those people. I think that's the thing that just, it inspires me so much in this work. I don't think I could be doing anything else.
Wow. Yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting that, Mada, because I have goosebumps, and for people who are listening or watching wouldn't know, but my mother-in-law Priscilla's memorial was a fundraiser for ASAP, right? Like that's what we did, and she,
Those were her instructions.
totally. And she was, yes, will and built that social community and got people involved and was such a great advocate for this story and the importance of it. And she also knew people in like really affluent worlds, the opposite, highly connected worlds, and she chose to highlight and work and support these people. And she would always talk about the beauty of the people and the difficulty, but the beauty of the communities and how much she learned from these communities. And I know she got a lot in her life, and she passed it on all the time to people. So I appreciate that. And I really appreciate both of you carrying on her work. Obviously, you want to be doing it. It's powerful. It's beautiful. There's more I want to ask about each of you and hear your stories. And I think we'll just let ASAP be the story today. But I appreciate both of you and your commitment. It shines through. It's wonderful. You've done a great job sharing the story and advocating for the kind of values that I'm like, what helps us work together. And this big one of the thread that Priscilla connected between these very rural, forgotten communities and these, first world communities and family is an important one. And I do want to say for listeners to know, and maybe you both can speak to this, how important focused donorship is, right? So as I understood it, that as the world's crises move from one thing to another, the money flows that way too. And it's very difficult for nonprofits like yourself to know what to do with so much flux and so much change. And I think the way that you're talked about the longevity of walking alongside these communities, the best kind of donorship, whatever it is the kind of people who can be counted on in a way, not just like drop in, obviously a nice splash of cash is great, but it's the building of relationships with nonprofits like yourself. What do you have to say about that?
I think it's partnership at the end of the day, isn't it? Like we partner with people in the communities. We partner with them for a long run, and we've been very, very privileged to have people partnering with us for the long haul too. And that is the reason ASAP is still here, despite being a small organization that, works, as Linet said, when nobody else is going. So it's everything. It's absolutely everything. It really is the backbone. We have very good support in South Africa as well. But it is the community that Scylla first started that is the reason this organization is still going, and I believe will carry on for many, many more years.
Yeah, great. Beautiful. And the invitation's open for additional partners. So I'm assuming if you, after hearing these stories, if you want to get involved, please reach out. That website's africansolutions.org. What else would you say in terms of helping people who are interested in this work to get involved?
I would say reach out, make contact, give us money. Yes, always, please. We'll stay in touch. We'll tell you all about what we do with it. Yeah. But also let us know if you know of a foundation that might be looking at Africa or Southern Africa, or does anyone know Elon Musk? I really want some Starlinks at this point. On a more serious note, though, who do you know that might be interested in supporting this work, not only from a personal philanthropical point of view, but that can leverage technology or that can leverage connections or anything at all? Please reach out. It's often interesting that you might not know what you have to offer in this case, but come and have a chat and set up a meeting. We'll figure it out.
Very good. Well, thank you both so much, Linet, Dube, Mada, Siebert. It's been really great to have you on the How Humans Work podcast.
Thank you so much, Jef, for having us.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much.